Hey guys, tonight we climb into the sootiest, most chaotic, slightly lemon-scented, don't ask time machine you've never wanted to board. Welcome to Victorian London, circa the 1850s, where the air is thick. The horses are louder than your landlord's blender, and you're about to regret absolutely everything. You step out into what appears to be daylight, but might also just be industrial fog with attitude. The air wraps around you like a damp wool sock, dense, sour, and vaguely metallic. Breathing feels optional. You cough once, then twice, and just like that, you're initiated. London has entered your lungs and claimed you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I always love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you besides the smell is the sound. It's a symphony of hooves on cobblestones, wheels squealing, vendors hollering things you can't quite decipher. Hot pies, fresh eels, dead dog removal. They're all shouting like they're trying to out-yell the city itself. And, frankly, the city is winning. You try to step aside to get your bearings, and promptly plunge your boot ankle-deep into something suspiciously warm and horse-adjacent. Congratulations! You've completed the London welcome ritual. Historians still argue whether the infamous Great Stink of 1858 was the worst period of urban odor in human history, or simply the moment Parliament finally decided they couldn't pretend not to smell it anymore. Either way, the Thames is more sewage than water right now, and the air has committed several olfactory crimes. Your eyes begin to sting. It's not emotional, it's just coal dust. A child no older than 6 whizzes past you, pulling a cart twice his size. He's wearing boots held together by string and determination, and he yells something about, "Watch the puddle, too late for you to dodge the splash." Your coat now has a new pattern: Thames, mud, and regret. Let's talk air quality. London's fog isn't just a bit misty. It's a lung-throttling cocktail of industrial coal smoke, chimney, soot, and general despair. These are the infamous pea soupers, the kind of fog where even locals lose their own front doors. Charles Dickens once described it as a darkness so thick you could slice it into bricks, which is poetic and, unfortunately, accurate. Some Victorians even believed fog was a physical substance that could sneak into your home like a burglar. And they weren't totally wrong. Chimneys, doors, and windows offered no defense. You could be eating dinner and still feel the air change, as if someone just opened the oven and poured the city directly into your soup. Oh, and soup. That's mostly just recycled tea water with optimism. Even Queen Victoria's own physicians warned her about London's foul air, though she rarely heeded it. Because, well, monarchy. You, on the other hand, are not royal, and your sinuses are filing complaints. As you shuffle forward, one thing becomes clear. Horses rule everything, and not in a majestic, galloping through meadows way. No, these are workhorses, pulling carts, trams, cabs, each producing approximately 20 pounds of manure a day. Multiply that by the thousands in the city, And you've got, well, enough to consider stilts as your main mode of travel. The city employs entire squads of crossing sweepers, often orphaned children or elderly men, to clear a path through the muck for a penny or two. You watch one now. He's barely taller than his broom, waving it with dramatic flair, like he's fencing the filth itself. He looks at you, eyes squinting through grime, and mutters, "You ain't from here." Correct. Small wizard. Correct. And then comes the clatter of hooves fast. A hansom cab barrels toward you. Driver shouting. Line snapping. You leap back, nearly into a lamppost, which is leaking gas. By the way, and the cab zooms past in a blur. You catch a whiff of its passenger's perfume, lavender, and panic. You grip the edge of a nearby railing. Catch your breath. And remember, this is just day one. You haven't even eaten yet, or looked for lodging, or figured out how many of your internal organs are optional in this timeline. Still, for all the grime and chaos, there's something hypnotic about it. The rhythm of the city pulses beneath your feet. The grime tells stories. The layers of noise overlap like Victorian dubstep. It's awful. It's loud. It's bizarre. And it's weirdly alive. But trust me, this is the easy part. You haven't even tried to drink the water yet. You shuffle off the curb, avoiding another pile of something organic, and decide it's time to find shelter. You're in 1850s London. After all, not a Renaissance fair. You need a roof, 4 walls, and ideally, no live rats in the mattress. Spoiler, you're going to compromise on at least 2 of those. The boarding house you stumble into is advertised as respectable, which in this context means it has stairs that don't scream, and only some of the wallpaper is peeling like sunburnt skin. A woman at the front, call her Mrs. Dreadsmoke, greets you with an expression that says she's seen things. Probably you. In a past life. She offers a room upstairs for 2 shillings a week, which sounds like a bargain, until you realize the room includes a cracked window, permanently stuck halfway open, a mattress filled with straw and mystery lumps, a wash basin, but no running water, a view of the alley that may or may not contain an amateur graveyard. Still, you take it. It's either that or sleep under a bridge. And those are already booked by chimney sweeps, night soil men, and the occasional drunk poet. You try to relax, but your upstairs neighbor is doing something that sounds like tap dancing with bricks. From the next room comes a man coughing in iambic pentameter. And somewhere, in the ceiling or wall, or maybe in your imagination, there's something scratching. You try not to think about it. It thinks about you. London in the 1850s was a city bursting at the seams. With over 2 million people packed into it, housing was both scarce and horrifying. Tenements were built so close together they practically held hands. Entire families lived in single rooms. And if you were really unlucky, you might be sharing your floorboards with a tannery or sausage factory. Or both. Historians still argue whether early housing reformers made a difference, or whether slum landlords just learned how to hide the dead rats better. The window lets in a draft that smells faintly of coal and toast. You take comfort in the toast part. You try to wash up before bed. The water you hauled up from the street pump has already turned cloudy in the basin. You stare at it. It stares back. Then you splash your face and hope for the best. Hygiene is not Victorian London's strong suit. Most bathed weekly, if that, and shared water was more common than not. You wonder how long this bowl of grime has been passed around. You decide not to ask. Soap is harsh, slimy, and vaguely medical. You scrub with something labeled chlorinated lime cake. It smells like disinfected sadness. You sit on the bed, and the mattress lets out a groan, like a ghost being stepped on. The straw inside shifts, and you're pretty sure something shifts back. Still, you're exhausted. You lie down fully clothed because contact with the sheets feels legally inadvisable and stare at the cracked ceiling. Somewhere, someone starts singing "My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean" in a minor key. Either that, or you've entered the haunting phase of time travel. You wonder what's below your floor. The ground level smells like fish and forgotten dreams. There was a shop fishmonger. Maybe. Or a candle maker. One of those delightful trades that ensure no one breathes easy. Victorian shops often doubled as homes. You imagine a family sleeping behind barrels of pickled eels. Above you, the footsteps start again. Now, with more dramatic pauses. Maybe your neighbor is staging a one-man performance of Macbeth, using only boots. You check your pockets for anything useful. You have lint, a button, and a vague sense of 21st century superiority that's rapidly eroding. The walls are thin, very thin. You hear whispers low, urgent, repetitive. A man is arguing with himself in two distinct accents. This could be madness, or just London. Hard to tell. A sudden knock at your door makes your heart stage a small rebellion. It's Mrs. Dread Smoke again, handing you a candle stub and reminding you that we don't allow whistling after midnight. You weren't whistling. She doesn't blink. She vanishes like a shadow into heavier shadow. You lock the door with a latch that feels more symbolic than effective. Then you sit in silence. The candle flickers. The air smells like old teeth. Something drips somewhere. Something always drips. Victorian London is not for the faint of heart or stomach. And yet, people lived like this. Millions of them. Every cough, every creaking stair, every suspicious bowl of stew, part of a daily survival ritual. Even Queen Victoria herself wrote of the capital's peculiar air as though it were a distant relative she preferred not to acknowledge. Fringe detail. Many boarding houses enforced curfews get home too late. And you'd sleep outside. Or in the stairwell with the cats. Which sounds bad until you realize some of those cats were smarter than their landlords. You pull your coat tighter. Exhale into the gloom. And wonder how anyone made it to morning without developing 3 kinds of bronchitis. Outside your grimy window, the gaslights flicker in the mist. London doesn't sleep. It just waits. Morning arrives, not with birdsong, but with yelling, loud, chaotic, deeply committed yelling vendors, milkmen, knife sharpeners, and possibly a man selling second-hand bricks are already in full voice before the sun finishes its stretch. You blink at the yellow-gray light sneaking through the cracked window and immediately sneeze. It smells like someone lit a coal fire in your sinuses. You survived the night. Technically, though your back disagrees. The mattress feels like a sack of potatoes that lost a bar fight. You attempt to sit up, and the bed lets out another creak of protest, possibly in Morse code. Your stomach growls loudly. It wants answers. You descend the narrow, groaning staircase, shoes sticking slightly on each step. Misses. Dread smoke is nowhere in sight. Possibly asleep in a vat of pickled onions. You step outside, into the already bustling street. And now comes the hardest part of the day, breakfast. Victorian London's idea of breakfast depends entirely on who you are, and you, friend, are not one of the lucky ones. You're poor, new, and currently evaluating whether pigeons count as free-range protein. The street offers options. If you're brave, a man with suspiciously blackened fingernails yells hot pies as he waves a tray stacked with steaming crusts. You buy one out of hunger and curiosity. The filling tastes like peppery glue with a chewy surprise. Could be beef. Could be something with more legs than beef usually has. Historians still argue whether these street pies actually contained meat or were just cleverly seasoned oats and regret. As you chew thoughtfully, another option rolls by the eel cart. Oh yes, Victorians loved eels. Jellied, stewed, pied, pickled, you name it. The Thames was practically an eel factory. And for many Londoners, this slippery delicacy was affordable and abundant. Which is probably why your stomach now sounds nervous. You pass a row of stalls selling bread that's either 3 days old or still emotionally recovering from being baked. Butter, when available, is often laced with chalk or mashed potato to bulk it up. You find this horrifying and somehow charming. A woman selling muffins screams at you until you awkwardly buy one. It tastes like damp hope and soot. You begin to understand food in Victorian London is not just about survival, it's about audacity. The audacity to eat something gray and call it nourishing. The audacity to fry things in lard so old, it might qualify as an ancestor. One mainstream fact bread adulteration was so rampant that people formed bread committees to test loaves for chalk, alum, and ground bones. Yes, bones. Bread inspectors existed, and they were busy. You duck into a small cafe well, more of a cupboard with chairs, and order tea. The water tastes like it was filtered through socks and a vague apology. But it's hot, and it briefly tricks your body into thinking it's safe. On the wall behind you, a sign reads, "No spitting on the floor. Violators will be removed." You glance down. The floor has clearly won this battle many times. A man at the next table slurps his porridge like he's trying to vacuum it. It tells you, unsolicited, that his aunt once cured her gout by standing in vinegar. You nod politely. He's not finished. He tells you she died anyway. You nod again. Slower. This is how conversations go here direct. Strange. And always slightly medical. Quirky tidbit. Roasted sparrows were sold as snacks at street corners, usually skewered on sticks. Think of it like 1850s kebab, but winged. You step back outside, and the city greets you again with a shout and a cloud of smoke. Across the street, a man is roasting chestnuts. Next to him, a dog wearing a bonnet is performing tricks for coins. You start to clap before realizing the dog might be better dressed than you. As you walk, you pass an oyster stall, cheap and popular with the working class, before oysters became fancy food for the rich. These oysters are not fresh. They glisten ominously in the morning sun. You make eye contact with one and feel judged. Now let's discuss taverns. It's 8:00 a.m. and already 3 men are stumbling out of a pub, arguing about whether Napoleon was actually short or just French. You are not ready for that level of debate. Or drink. Alcohol is safer than water here, which explains why even children sometimes sipped beer or gin. You begin to understand why. Tea helps, but gin numbs. You make a mental note to look into temperance societies, Victorian anti-drinking clubs, formed by people who tried very hard to save others from themselves. Some were noble. Others just really hated fun. In the distance, a bell rings. A nearby church is announcing the hour. But you're distracted by another sound, your stomach. Still, unconvinced that it received food, historians still argue whether the food of the working class was truly as horrific as reported, or whether Victorian moralists exaggerated it to push reforms. Either way, your current breakfast is staging a mutiny. You find a quiet alleyway. Relatively quiet. There's a man shaving a goat and sit on a crate to regroup. The city swirls around you like a soup made of noise and movement. You're not just hungry. You're Victorian hungry, a combination of calories, qual dust, and low expectations. And tomorrow, you get to do it again. Assuming the pie doesn't kill you, you clutch your stomach still negotiating with that mysterious pie and wobble your way back toward your boarding house, hoping for a quiet moment to digest both food and reality. But rest in Victorian London is not easily earned. You pass a group of ragged children playing a game that appears to involve a dead rat and some string. One of them offers to show you a real human tooth for a farthing. You politely decline, because you've just eaten, and also because it might be yours if you stay here much longer. Time to get dressed properly, because your borrowed 31st century hoodie is getting side-eyed by every bonnet-wearing local. You stop by a used clothing stall, where you can purchase second-hand garments previously owned by people who may or may not have survived consumption. You choose a faded wool coat that smells like mothballs and resolve. The trousers come with a surprise hole. And the boots are ambitious. They fit in the way that betrayal fits into a friendship. Victorian fashion is not forgiving. If you're a man, you're expected to look like a respectable chimney. If you're a woman, congratulations. You get 30 pounds of layered fabric and the threat of spontaneous combustion. Corsets aren't just fashion, they're architecture. You try one on and immediately forget your mother's name. Historians still argue whether the average Victorian waist size was truly smaller, or if women simply developed a lifelong ability to not exhale. You admire yourself in a smudged mirror. The look says funeral undertaker's assistant with a dash of coal enthusiast. Your boots make a soft squelching sound, likely the leftover spirit of their previous owner. You're now visually assimilated. But you can't walk more than 10 steps without realizing you're breathing through multiple layers of wool, starch, and industrial smoke. You are sweating in 4K. As you move through the city, you notice something odd. People stare not because you're strange, but because no one looks comfortable here. Everyone is bundled, shivering, swatting soot. A good outfit is less about fashion and more about survival. Gloves keep your fingers from freezing. Hats keep your brain from catching chill. Shawls serve as shields against both men and moisture. A fringe detail. Some women powdered their faces with lead-based cosmetics, Pale skin was in vogue because it showed you didn't have to work outdoors. Unfortunate side effect: slow, quiet poisoning. But hey, anything for that glow. On the street corner, a dandy struts past you, top hat, gold pocket watch, cane that's more swagger than support. He smells faintly of lavender and unearned confidence. He winks at a passing maid who looks ready to slap him with a wet haddock. Fashion here is theatrical, but it also hides things. Pockets concealed in petticoats, blood hidden in boots, fake moles used to cover smallpox scars. Everyone's costume is a soft lie told by their clothing. You duck into a small haberdashery, where a tailor, with a face like a prune, offers you a cravat. He calls it essential for respectability. You ask how to tie it. He sighs dramatically and mutters, "Outsiders. Victorian manners are another invisible garment. You're expected to know when to tip your hat, how to avoid improper eye contact, and whether one should curtsy, nod, bose, or just vanish into the fog. Every social movement is loaded with nuance. Use the wrong glove hand, and you're essentially declaring war." There are entire manuals, yes. Books on how to dress, speak, and walk appropriately. You try to follow one from memory. Walk with purpose. Avoid alleys. Don't lock eyes with a stranger unless you want to marry them or duel them. A woman passing by drops a handkerchief. You bend to pick it up and return it. She blushes. A man nearby sees and narrows his eyes. You might be betrothed now. You walk away quickly. You don't have room in your schedule for a Victorian wedding. Historians still argue whether fashion drove social divisions or merely revealed them. Either way, your coat now declares you're probably poor, mildly literate, and unlikely to survive the season. Back at your lodging, you hang up your new attire by a bent nail and sit by the window, staring out through a pane of street glass. The people below bustle in their layers, cloth armor against a city that seems determined to wear them down. Everyone's got a hut. Everyone's got a limp. Everyone's dodging something, whether it's carriages, chimney smoke, or emotions. A girl in a bonnet walks by carrying a basket of dried flowers. She's humming. A man shouts after her. But she doesn't turn. Maybe the flowers are fake. Maybe the man shouting is just London ambiance. And maybe your boots are whispering again. Evening creeps in like spilled ink. The gas lamps sputter to life, casting a warm glow that somehow makes everything look more haunted. You wonder how anyone ever took a deep breath here without tasting coal or regret. You lie back on your lumpy mattress, corset long abandoned, and think Victorian fashion isn't about style. It's about endurance. And pockets. Always check for hidden pockets. The next morning, you wake to the unmistakable sound of someone retching in the alleyway. A comforting, familiar rhythm by now. You stretch, feel, every straw lump in your mattress greet your spine individually, and accept that it's time to find a job. Because, unless you plan on joining the street musicians who play spoons and cough in harmony, you're going to need income. Or at least food that doesn't involve mystery gravy. Stepping into the street, you are immediately hit with a wall of soot and hot cabbage air. The city never sleeps, it just hiccups. You pull your coat tighter and begin wandering toward the industrial districts. Time to see what's available for someone with no experience. no references, and only a loose grasp of 1850s slang. Turns out, there are jobs. Plenty of them, but they're all designed to age you a decade a week. You pass a gang of chimney sweeps children, mostly blackened from head to toe, singing a jaunty tune that sounds vaguely threatening. They laugh and disappear into a tiny rooftop hole. You blink. One drops a button and doesn't go back for it. You keep walking. Historians still argue whether chimney sweeping was the worst child labor gig in Victorian London. It had stiff competition from matchstick girls, mudlarks, and the boys who turned gin bottles upside down to catch the dregs. You approach a tannery next. The smell punches you in the throat acres of animal hides, soaking in urine and lime. A man in a blood-spotted apron squints at you. "You got strong hands," you say. "Sort of." He hands you a skinning knife. You immediately nope yourself out of there. On to the next option, the match factory. You're told girls here work 10 to 12 hours a day, dipping wooden sticks into white phosphorus, earning just enough to rent a corner of a mattress. The catch: that phosphorus eats away your jawbone. They call it phossy jaw. Symptoms include swelling, pain, and a glow-in-the-dark face. Not ideal. You keep moving. A printer's shop looks promising. Inside, a man covered in ink shows you how to operate a press the size of a horse cart. "Easy," he says. "Just don't get your fingers caught." You nod. In the background, a younger boy counts his remaining fingers. 4. Next, the docks. You try to lift a sack of barley. You nearly herniate your soul. The foreman chuckles and offers you the job anyway, less out of kindness, more out of cruel amusement. You decline, citing a sudden allergy to gravity. You wander into a textile mill, one of the better-paying jobs, relatively speaking, but inside, it's a thunderstorm of clattering looms and cotton fluff. Workers move like ghosts. Silent. Mechanical. Blank-eyed. The air is so thick with fiber particles that people wear handkerchiefs over their mouths if they can afford the luxury of a handkerchief. Quirky tidbit: in some mills, workers would urinate on the cotton to soften it. No one talks about this on the tour. Your head is pounding. It's not just from the noise, it's the realization that survival here costs your body. Everything is paid for in fatigue, soot, and years shaved from your life. Historians still argue whether Victorian reformers exaggerated working conditions to stir public outrage, or whether the reality was even worse than described. You suspect the latter. You find a quieter job notice: night watch needed. Wages modest. Must own stick. You do not own a stick. You do not want this stick-related job. You move on. Eventually, you come across a job that doesn't require heavy lifting. Full facial scarring. R. Immediate, despair copious. You sit. You write. For hours, over and over, until your fingers curl like boiled shrimp. But hey, at least you're not glowing in the dark. The shop where you land this rare gig smells of candle wax and boredom. Your boss, a man named Mr. Pensley, breathes like a man perpetually disappointed in sandwiches. He hands you a stack of documents and a pen that leaks. "Copy all of this," he says, "and don't get ink on the margins." By hour 3, your hand is numb, your eyes twitch, and you've written the word herein so many times it has ceased to look like English. The candle gutters. You think you see it blink. During your lunch break, if you can call half a stale scone and a sip of mystery tea a lunch, you meet another clerk who tells you he once copied legal statements for 23 hours straight during a fraud case. Did you win, you ask? He stares into the middle distance. No one wins. The day ends, and your back cracks like a snapped violin. You're handed a single shilling and a nod that implies, try harder tomorrow. You pocket the coin. Wincing at its weight, it's more symbolic than spendable. You trudge home through the gas-lit streets, passing tired faces, slumped shoulders, and boots that barely stay attached to feet. It's a quiet parade of endurance. You see a man asleep, standing up. You see a woman bottle-feeding a goat. You see a child juggling apples and insults. You've learned something today. Victorian London will let you work. It just won't let you rest. You wake up sore in places you didn't know you had. Your wrist pops. Your knees creak. Your eyes feel like they've been lightly sanded. Welcome to day 2 of gainful Victorian employment, where job security is mostly a rumor and ergonomic chairs haven't even been dreamed of. Your stomach, understandably cautious after yesterday's adventures. Voices its protest. You try not to think about that meat pie with the surprise filling. It haunts you like a Dickensian ghost. Instead, you decide to try something less chewy. Porridge. Surely porridge can't hurt you. You find a food stall with a large pot, bubbling ominously. The vendor ladles out a scoop and hands it over in a dented tin bowl. It's beige, gluey, and already has a spoon stuck in it. You stir. It stirs back. You eat it anyway. Uneventful. The taste. Imagine sadness. Boiled. After that harrowing breakfast, you realize it's time to deal with something inevitable: healthcare. Because you've developed a persistent cough, likely from the coal-choked air, and your left eye has been twitching since noon yesterday. It's probably the stress, or the ink fumes, or the fact that every surface in your boarding house has a faint fuzz growing on it. You wander toward the nearest dispensary, which smells like vinegar and regret. The waiting room is full of people who look like they've already accepted their fate. A woman clutches her side, while her toddler chews on something, not food. A man with a bandaged hand is arguing with the wall. You're pretty sure the wall is winning. The doctor, when you finally see him, has the vibe of someone who once tried to remove a spleen with a butter knife and might do it again for sport. He peers at your throat, nods solemnly, and prescribes laudanum, which is basically alcohol and opium in a fancy bottle. Take 2 spoonfuls before bed, he says, and don't operate any heavy machinery. You do not tell him. You nearly passed out from lifting a stack of ledgers yesterday. Mainstream fact: Victorian medicine loved its tonics. Laudanum was a household staple, used for headaches, coughs, teething babies, and existential dread. It worked until it didn't. People got addicted. People forgot things. People wandered into traffic, which at the time meant horses. You leave the dispensary lighter in the wallet and heavier in the probably addicted to something now department. You wander past a shop advertising magnet therapy, and another that claims to cure female hysteria with a device best left unexplained in a PG-13 script. Fringe tidbit: Some Victorians believed you could cure everything from bad moods to gout by standing barefoot in wet grass while facing the moon. Desperate for fresh air, you head toward Hyde Park. The trees are soot-dusted, but still vaguely green, and you see upper-class ladies strolling with parasols, protected from both sun and poor people. You sit on a bench and let your lungs stretch gently. The fog here isn't as thick, and you can almost taste something like oxygen. That illusion dies quickly. A man sneezes nearby and doesn't cover his mouth. You remember germ theory hasn't fully caught on yet. Some doctors still believe disease spreads through miasma, bad air. Hand washing optional. Sterilization, a curious fad. Surgical instruments, sometimes cleaned, sometimes wiped on a sleeve. Historians still argue whether the general public feared illness more than poverty, or simply accepted that both came as a package deal. You make your way to a public bathhouse, clutching the single coin you've saved. For a few pennies, you can soak in warm water and pretend you aren't slowly falling apart. The building is steamy, and loud bathers groaning in pleasure or pain. Attendants scrubbing the walls with brushes the size of terriers. You undress in a cubicle the size of a coffin and try not to think about who used this towel last. You ease into the water, which is lukewarm and vaguely suspicious, and immediately feel your muscles unclench. A man next to you starts singing softly. It's Greensleeves, but in the wrong key. The bath lasts 10 minutes. The memory lasts a lifetime. You dry off, mostly, and dress again. The city awaits. You've been clean for 3 whole minutes, and already a child throws a wet sock at your shoe. A cart rolls by, spraying mud or something worse across your shin. A pigeon targets you with eerie precision. You sigh. The moment's gone. Later that evening, back at the boarding house, you consider taking your laudanum dose. The bottle has a child-proof cap Victorian style, meaning poison warnings, written in Latin. You take a careful spoonful. It tastes like cloves and bad decisions. 10 minutes later, the pain in your ribs dulls, and your brain begins to float slightly left of your skull. No wonder people liked this stuff. You feel like your thoughts are wrapped in cotton. You lie back and drift into half-sleep, imagining the sounds of the city melting into lullaby form. A street cry becomes a harmony. A dog fight becomes a drum solo. Someone yells, "Eels," and you accept this as a spiritual truth. It's not healthcare. Not really. But it's something. You wake up feeling, well, not quite human. Somewhere, between a sleep-deprived librarian and a forgotten garden gnome, the laudanum left you foggy, floaty, and dreaming of a world where cobblestones are soft and breakfast makes sense. Sadly, real London has arrived again, and it's just as loud, filthy, and judgmental as yesterday. You shuffle out of bed, still dressed in last night's clothes, because undressing in this climate feels like an extreme sport. Your boots argue with your feet. Your breath puffs clouds in the cold air. Time for another round of urban survival. 1850s edition. Today, you decide to try something new. Public transportation. Walking is exhausting. Your legs are staging a mutiny, and you want to see the city without having to fight it. You spot an omnibus down the road, one of those big, Boxy carriages pulled by horses and covered in soot like everything else. You wave it down and board. Instantly, three things happen. Your head hits the roof. Your foot lands in something wet. A stranger breathes directly into your ear. Victorian transport is not luxurious. It's barely functional. The inside smells like wet wool, cigar smoke, and pessimism. You hold onto a brass rail that's warmer than it should be and try not to inhale through your nose. A man beside you is reading a newspaper aloud to no one. Another is eating a turnip like it's an apple. The omnibus lurches forward, nearly launching you into a governess's bonnet. She glares at you like you've insulted her ancestry. You apologize. She doesn't blink. You sit down, slowly, on a cushion that squelches. Mainstream fact: omnibuses were the early version of public buses, affordable, reasonably efficient, and terrifying. Horses pulled them, and passengers often rode on top, clinging to railings in fog, rain, or casual near-death. Your ride takes you through the city's winding streets. You pass shopfronts selling everything from sewing needles to embalming services. You pass a man trying to wrestle a pig into a bar. No one looks twice. At a stop, more passengers cram in. One sneezes into a glove and then offers you a toffee. You politely decline. A boy hops on and begins selling pencils with the speed and volume of a street preacher. You buy one just to make him stop yelling. Then it happens. The omnibus jolts to a violent stop. A wheel hits a rut or a ghost, and the entire cabin heaves. You and the governess fall into each other. She gasps. Somewhere in London. A wedding invitation is drafted. The driver shouts something about the axle. You all disembark while he inspects the damage, which involves swearing at the wheel and kicking it with a boot that has visible holes. You stand in the street. Surrounded by mildly dazed Victorians, you decide to try a different ride, the hackney carriage. These are the taxis of the time, horse-drawn, cramped, and surprisingly expensive. You hail one with a dramatic arm wave. The driver, a man with 3 teeth and 6 opinions, lets you in. The cab smells like hay and ghost stories. You tell him your destination. He nods, mutters something about avoiding Oxford Street this time, and slaps the reins. The ride is smoother. Marginally. But the traffic is enthusiastic. Carts weave in and out. Children dart across the road. And a man with a wheelbarrow full of fish nearly collides with you. There are no traffic lights. No rules. Just loud noises and survival instincts. Quirky tidbit. Crossing the street in Victorian London was a high-risk activity. So much so that some places had crossing guides people paid to help you get from one side to the other without being trampled. The driver drops you off near the Strand, and you tip him a coin that he bites before pocketing. As you walk away, he yells, "Watch out for the pudding thief," which might be slang or a genuine threat. You try one more transport option, the Underground, or at least the earliest version of it still in development during this decade, but worth imagining. The Metropolitan Railway won't open until 1863. But the idea of traveling below London in a tunnel filled with smoke and regret is already brewing. Historians still argue whether early rail tunnels contributed more to public convenience or widespread anxiety. One early passenger described the ride as like being swallowed by a dragon made of iron and steam. Back in reality, you continue on foot. You pass a canal boat, colorful, creaking, and gliding silently past buildings with smoke-stained bricks. A man tips his cap as you watch him drift by. He has the look of someone who has never rushed in his life. You stop at a corner and observe a peculiar scene. A small crowd gathered around a man on stilts, reciting Shakespeare in a Scottish accent while juggling onions. London transport might be flawed, but it's roadside entertainment top tier. By late afternoon, your legs ache, your lungs hurt, and you long for a vehicle with heating, suspension, and silence. But despite everything, there's a strange beauty in the chaos, a rhythm to the city's movement, a pulse beneath the filth. And as the gaslights flicker to life again, and horses clip-clop like metronomes over cobblestone, you realize something. You survived the commute. Barely, but you'll never complain about modern public transport again. By now, your boots are more blister than leather. You've inhaled enough soot to qualify as a chimney. And yet, something inside you, some mix of Victorian curiosity and mild hallucination, tells you to press on. Maybe it's the laudanum. Maybe it's that weird porridge. Or maybe it's just the thrill of surviving this long without getting cholera. Yet, you decide to walk along the Thames. Because what better way to unwind than a peaceful riverside stroll, right meant? Wrong. You reach the banks, expecting gentle lapping water. Maybe the distant cry of gulls. Instead, you're hit with a smell so foul, so utterly disrespectful, that your body considers spontaneous hibernation. It's like old soup, forgotten fish, and the ghosts of expired cheeses decided to hold hands and leap into your nostrils. You found the River Thames in the mid-19th century in all her toxic glory, mainstream historical fact by the 1850s. The Thames was essentially a long, wet sewer. London dumped everything into it: household waste, industrial runoff, and human leftovers. The great stink of 1858 was so bad, Parliament reportedly soaked its curtains in chloride of lime to mask the odor. You try to breathe through your mouth, but even that feels like sipping decay. Every ripple on the river surface seems suspicious. You spot something floating. Could be a log. Could be a mattress. I could be someone's tragic Tuesday. You turn away from the river, hoping to clear your head. But it follows you. The smell clings to your coat. Your thoughts. Possibly your soul. A nearby man tips his hat and says, "Lovely day for it." Like the air isn't actively declaring war on your lungs. You find a bench and sit down, trying not to look directly at the water. A rat jogs past, like it's late for an appointment. 2 more follow. You're starting to think they might be in a union. The man beside you, clearly a local, strikes up a conversation. "Beautiful spot," he says, waving toward the river. "My cousin swam in it once. Never the same after." You don't ask what that means. You already suspect the answer involves screaming and a mysterious rash. You ask him why nothing is being done about the smell. He shrugs. Some say it's the city's perfume. He chuckles, then coughs for a full 30 seconds. Historians still argue whether the Thames's condition was simply a byproduct of industrial growth or a result of profound governmental neglect. Either way, It got so bad that even Queen Victoria reportedly recoiled when crossing London Bridge. As you continue your walk, if you notice, public notices posted on the walls near the embankment. Boiling water before use. Avoid bathing. Do not consume Thames fish. All solid advice. All clearly ignored. You pass by a barge unloading barrels labeled night soil. You wish you hadn't read that. Then someone explains that's what they used to call human waste collected from cesspits. You stare at the barge. The barge stares back. You both agree not to speak of this again. Fringe tidbit. There were entire professions dedicated to this stuff. Nightmen would empty household privies after dark and cart it away usually to fields or directly into the river. Glamorous work. Truly. Rumor has it some became rich. Others just became haunted. You head inland, away from the river, only to be hit by a different kind of stink, a tannery, then a candleworks, then a glue factory. Your nose is on strike. Your brain follows shortly after. You duck into a churchyard for a breather. Quieter here. Almost peaceful. Until a dog starts digging at the edge of a fresh grave and pulls out, well, something formerly human. You blink. The vicar gently shoos the dog away, like this happens every Tuesday. In the distance, you spot the new embankment work's early stages of Joseph Bazalgette's sewer revolution. It's 1850s London's biggest flex, a massive underground engineering project to redirect waste away from the Thames and save the city from its own digestive habits. You salute it silently. A monument to not living in your own filth. For now, though, you're still firmly in the pre-Bazalgette era. You trudge past riverside warehouses, their windows glowing with lantern light. Their interiors probably filled with spices, opium, or poorly documented bones. You try not to imagine the shipping manifests. Eventually, the fog rolls in London's signature mood lighting. The gas lamps flicker. Shadows stretch. The Thames disappears behind a veil of mist. And for one surreal moment, the city feels ancient and unknowable, like it's watching you. Then a seagull poops on your shoulder, and the spell breaks. You decide that's enough sightseeing for one evening. You limp back towards your lodging, clutching your scarf tighter and breathing through your sleeve. You pass a man trying to sell oysters, yelling, "2 a penny." Fresh from the river. You do not stop. You do not make eye contact. You will not be tempted by Thames oysters. That way lies madness. Back in your room. You light a candle. Remove your boots with a hiss and collapse into bed. The stink of the river still clings to your coat. But at least it's no longer trying to climb into your mouth. You reflect on your riverside stroll. Scenic? No. Unforgettable. Unfortunately. Yes. You dream of cleaner waters, of sunlit streams and lavender soap. Then you wake up to the familiar aroma of damp walls. Fried something. And possibly Victorian despair. The good news, you're still alive. The bad news, you have to go back outside. Today's goal is simple safety. Or at least, understanding the system that's supposed to pretend to keep you safe. You want to learn how law and order works in this grime-caked metropolis, because after yesterday's Thames adventure, you've decided that if the river doesn't kill you, the city's casual chaos might be. So, Off you go. On a mission to find the local police force. Spoiler, they're not quite what you expect. Mainstream fact: the Metropolitan Police was formed in 1829 by Sir Robert Peel, hence the terms bobbies and peelers. It was Britain's first organized police force. And by the 1850s, they were still figuring things out, sometimes badly. You head toward a small brick station. Tucked between a gin shop and what looks like a combination taxidermist bakery, a constable stands out front, proudly polishing a baton that looks more decorative than useful. He has a mustache with its own postcode and a look that says he once arrested a cabbage just to feel something. You introduce yourself. Trying to be polite, he narrows his eyes, squints up at the sky, and says, "You ain't one of them chartists, are you?" You assure him you're just passing through. He grunts and tells you the first rule of policing in London: look confident and wear the hat. Apparently, the uniform does most of the work. The tall domed helmet gives the impression of height and authority. The reality: some of these officers have had a week's training and a strong dislike of stairs. You follow him inside to get a sense of how crimes are handled. The station smells like ink, damp wool, and confusion. A man behind the desk is trying to spell embezzlement and keeps getting stuck after embezzle. A drunk in the corner sings lullabies to a boot. No one intervenes. Your constable guide explains that most crimes are petty pickpocketing, drunkenness, loitering, vagrancy. Occasionally, a brawl breaks out over bread prices or who has the louder goat. You ask what happens to serious criminals. He shrugs. We send him to the magistrate and hope he's sober. Fringe tidbit in early days. The police weren't armed with guns, just wooden truncheons and very stern looks. Many people distrusted them, seeing them as government spies or fancy bullies in blue. You observe an interrogation. A small boy, maybe 8, is accused of stealing a pie. The constable interrogating him is sweating more than the child. The boy denies everything, offers half a sausage as a bribe, then runs out the back door when no one's looking. Sometimes they're too fast for the law. Your guide says with a sigh, "We'll catch him again next Tuesday." Maybe. Historians still argue whether the early police helped reduce crime or simply documented it better. Statistics went up, but so did complaints about overreach and class bias. You wander back outside, curious to see the police in action. You don't have to wait long. Down the street, 2 constables chase a man who's yelling, "I'm innocent." He's clutching a satchel and sprinting like his life depends on it. It might. The constables stop after half a block to catch their breath. One of them starts quoting Shakespeare for morale. You watch the suspect vanish into a crowd. Justice in action. You ask a street vendor if the police are helpful. She scoffs. Helpful. They once arrested my husband for suspicious vegetables. You don't ask for clarification. By evening, you decide to visit a magistrate's court just to see the system in motion. The room is small, dark, and filled with more drama than a school play. A man stands trial for stealing a spoon. His defense: it looked lonely. The magistrate: an elderly man with eyebrows like sleeping cats, sentences him to a fine and 3 days cleaning public benches. You lean over to the clerk beside you and ask if this is typical. "Oh, this is quiet," he whispers. "Last week, a man claimed his dog was possessed by Napoleon." You return to the street a little wiser and a lot more concerned. You pass a wanted poster on a lamppost. The sketch looks vaguely like every man you've ever seen. The listed crimes: loitering, lamp oil theft, and moral corruption. You check your reflection. You look morally uncertain. Better keep moving. You wrap up your day near a public square where a group of constables are patrolling. Well, standing. One is definitely asleep. Another is feeding bits of biscuit to a passing cat. You wave politely. The cat waves back. Possibly, you walk home feeling strangely relieved. Yes. Crime is everywhere. Yes. The legal system is a patchwork of guesswork and wigs. But still, there's an effort, a structure, a weird, wheezing system trying to keep the wheels on. And in a city this chaotic, even half-hearted order feels like progress. You wake to shouting. Again. This time, it's not your landlord yelling about rent, or the neighbor reciting romantic poetry to his soup. No, this is a newsboy, maybe 10 years old, screaming headlines with the volume of a cannon and the urgency of a man on fire. Baby born with 2 heads, he hollers. Queen spotted drinking tea with a ghost. You crack open the window. It's still dark out. You check your pocket watch if it weren't broken. It would confirm your suspicion. Victorian mornings don't wait for sunlight or accuracy. You decide to investigate. The boy is selling papers for a penny apiece. You give him one and receive in return a folded pile of nonsense and ink smudges. The front page announces a sea monster spotted off Brighton Pier. The illustration looks suspiciously like a walrus in a hat. You flip through politics, weather, horoscopes, and a column called Visions from Beyond the Veil. The science page claims you can cure baldness with snail juice and positive thinking. The ads utter chaos. One offers instant fortune via phrenology. Another recommends beef extract as a cure for heartbreak. Mainstream historical fact: the Victorian press was booming. Thanks to steam-powered printing presses and cheaper paper, newspapers exploded in popularity, but many publications favored sensationalism over substance. Yellow journalism wasn't just a phase. It was practically a national pastime. You try another paper, different name. Same vibes. You notice some stories are recycled word for word. One reports a murder in Shoreditch that also apparently happened in Camden, Glasgow, and possibly Portugal. The murder weapon, a haunted umbrella. You spot a man in a bowler hat reading intently and approach him for comment. You believe this stuff, you ask? He knows, Saley. Course. It's printed. In it. Victorians trusted printed word like it was divine gospel. If it had ink, it had truth. Unfortunately, most of it had drama first, facts second, especially with crime reporting. Murder was front-page gold. And some papers even hired fiction writers to punch up real cases. Fringe tidbit. One reporter claimed to have interviewed Jack the Ripper's ghost through a medium. The ghost, apparently, was remorseful, but refused to provide his real name. Too soon, he allegedly whispered. You wander past a shop window displaying the latest broadsheets. Some are serious. The Times and the Morning Chronicle, but even those flirt with the occasional outlandish claim when circulation dips. Then there's the Illustrated Police News, which has drawings of every crime imaginable: brawls, thefts, werewolf sightings, all helpfully illustrated with wild-eyed villains and fainting damsels. Historians still argue whether these papers reflected Victorian society's worst fears or actively created them. The press fed on panic, superstition, and spectacle like a starved wolf at a tea party. You decide to visit a news office. Inside, men in waistcoats and ink-stained cuffs shout at each other over clattering typewriters. The editor smokes 3 cigars at once. A reporter types furiously while balancing a ferret on his lap. The air smells like pipe smoke and ambition. You ask about the editorial process. Process, the editor barks. Someone D's. We write it better. Add a gypsy curse if there's space. You nod. Makes sense. You try to help with a story: woman claims pigeons stole her bonnet. The editor nods. Adds, possibly, aliens, and shoves it into the middle column. You ask if people ever complain. He laughs so hard, he drops a cigar. Only when we spell their names wrong. Outside again. You watch people reading aloud to each other, especially in parks and pubs. Literacy is growing, and so is the hunger for scandal. But no one is fact-checking. The idea of a retraction is treated like witchcraft. You decide to test the system. You make up a headline: man marries donkey, claims true love. You whisper it near a paper boy. Within minutes, it's in circulation. By sundown, the donkey's getting fan mail. The line between entertainment and information is blurry at best. But in this foggy, chaotic city, it's the stories that matter, truth-adjacent or not. People want escape. They want wonder. They want to believe that behind the curtain of smog and soot, the world is still full of mystery. You head to a penny theater that night. On stage, a dramatic reenactment of The Werewolf of Whitechapel, based entirely on a newspaper story that never happened. The crowd eats it up. You sit beside a man who claims he saw the beast himself. Had eyes like lanterns. He whispers, sipping gin from a flask shaped like a duck. The play ends with a full moon, a dramatic scream, and a papier-mâché tree falling on a constable. Thunderous applause. The audience leaves thrilled, terrified, and entirely unconcerned about what was real. That's the Victorian media world in a nutshell. And somehow, it makes your own social feed feel almost peaceful. You know the fog is bad when you can't find your own feet. You blink, wave a hand in front of your face, and still see nothing but thick, soupy gray. It's like walking through lukewarm porridge, if porridge could smell faintly of coal smoke and despair. You've wandered into what Victorians lovingly call a pea super, a fog, so dense it's less of a weather event and more of a personality. The kind that swallows gas lamps whole and makes horses walk sideways out of sheer confusion. Mainstream historical fact: London's infamous fogs were a lethal combo of natural mist and coal smoke from thousands of fireplaces. By the mid-19th century, these smog events weren't just inconvenient, they were deadly. Visibility could drop to mere inches, and respiratory deaths spiked every winter. You stumble along blindly, arms outstretched, looking like a haunted scarecrow. You hear clopping hooves somewhere to your left. A bell rings. Someone yells, "Oi!" Who took me goat, you freeze. You take 2 cautious steps and promptly fall into a puddle that feels suspiciously warm. You are not okay. You reach what might be a lamppost and cling to it like a lost sailor hugging the mast. A woman passes by, holding a kerosene lantern the size of a toddler. She disappears again in 2 seconds. Was she real? You'll never know. A man appears beside you, coughing theatrically. Terrible weather, he says, as if you're in polite drizzle. He pulls out a pocket watch, checks it, then squints at the horizon. You do too. There is no horizon. Only soup. He introduces himself as a fog walker. Apparently, some Londoners made a business of guiding people through thick fog for a small fee. He offers his services for 6 pence or a sandwich. You offer half a stale crumpet. He accepts. You're now officially being guided through apocalyptic air by a man named Douglas, who claims he once arm-wrestled Charles Dickens. Fringe tidbit. There were indeed such people link boys in earlier periods, later replaced by lantern carriers and self-appointed fog guides. Some were helpful. Others led clients into dark alleys and introduced them to new and exciting ways to lose their money. You and Douglas shuffle through the mist, which smells increasingly like someone left cabbage on a fire and then forgot it existed. Occasionally, shapes emerge: a statue, a bench, a cow. Then they're gone again, like dreams or unpaid debts. Suddenly, Douglas stops. This is where it happened, he says. Dramatically, you ask what? He leans in and whispers, the fog murder. You wait. He doesn't elaborate. Historians still argue whether the so-called fog murders were true events or just tabloid exaggerations. The idea of killers lurking in dense fog was too deliciously terrifying for Victorian newspapers to resist. Stories circulated of stabbings, stranglings, and disappearances, many of them unverified, all of them terrifying. Douglas points to a nearby pub and says you've earned a break. The place is called the Blind Ferret. Inside, the light is dim, the walls are damp, and the barman looks like he wrestles fish for sport. But it's warm, and you can breathe. Sort of. You sit beside the hearth with a lukewarm ale and listen to patrons swap fog stories. One man claims he lost his mother-in-law in a fog 3 years ago, still waiting for her to return. No one's in a hurry to solve that one. Another swears he once walked from Whitechapel to Westminster by accident, following what he thought was his dog but turned out to be a hat. The fire cracks. Someone sneezes directly into their scarf. The fog presses against the window like a nosy ghost. You sip your drink and think about the layers of danger the city wears. It's not just the smells, or the germs, or the police who can't run in their shoes. It's the simple fact that sometimes you literally can't see what's coming. You finish your drink, thank Douglas, and stumble back outside. The fog is thicker now, if that's even possible. Your breath joins the mist. You walk slowly, one cautious step at a time, counting cobblestones and trying not to fall into another surprise puddle. You pass a street preacher shouting about divine punishment. You pass a pickpocket who bumps into you, apologizes, and hands back your coin, before realizing you have nothing worth stealing. Then, somehow, as suddenly as it arrived, the fog begins to lift. A breeze stirs the smog. Street lamps emerge like tired stars. You see outlined shops, wagons, a man selling eels from a cart shaped like a coffin. The city reassembles itself. Brick by uncertain brick. You take a deep breath. Instantly regret it. Then smile anyway. You've survived the fog. For now. After the fog, you expect peace. A brief moment of stillness. A polite break from chaos. Instead, you get a handshake from a stranger with 2 missing fingers, an eye that doesn't blink, and a voice like gravel soaked in gin. "Welcome to the crowd," he says cheerily, before melting back into the throng. Because this, you realize, is another Victorian specialty: zero concept of personal space. You've wandered into a public lecture, except lecture is a generous word. It's more like a cross between a tavern brawl and amateur hour at a philosophy club. The hall is jam-packed with wool coats, elbow jabs, and people arguing over whether ghosts have social lives. You squeeze into a seat between a man who smells like burnt milk and a woman aggressively knitting. Mainstream historical fact, public lectures, debates, and rational recreation events were all the rage in 19th century London. The working and middle classes flocked to free and cheap events on science, philosophy, history, and anything remotely exciting, sometimes even seances and phrenology. The speaker tonight is a man with a walrus mustache and the self-confidence of a man who once read a book upside down and still got the gist. He bangs his walking stick against the podium and booms tonight's topic: "Are lemurs descended from pharaohs?" The crowd is instantly divided. Some cheer, some boo. A man behind you throws a sandwich in protest. You duck. The knitting woman beside you mutters, "Same nonsense as last week," but keeps clicking her needles like they're weapons. You try to follow the lecture, but it's hard. Every few minutes someone yells, "Balderdash," or "Cite your sources." "Reginald," or "That's not what the lemur told me." Someone in the back starts beatboxing with a harmonica. You're not sure if it's part of the event or just London being London. Fringe tidbit: these chaotic gatherings weren't rare. In fact, some were deliberately theatrical. Speakers used props, live animals, and even light shows to keep audiences engaged. And sometimes, just sometimes, people came purely for the yelling. You escape at intermission and decide to explore quieter venues. You duck into a coffee house, Victorian edition. That means weak coffee, strong opinions, and about a dozen people reading newspapers aloud at once. A man at your table reads an editorial claiming the moon is hollow and filled with stardust. Another says, "Queen Victoria has a twin who secretly runs a bakery in York." You smile politely and chew your biscuit with the force of someone trying not to scream. You overhear snippets. And that's why I never trust a man with symmetrical ears. The steam engine is a divine punishment. If rats can dance, what else can they do? Historians still argue whether these dense public gatherings were progressive enlightenment or just Victorian Reddit. But louder. You decide to leave and visit a gallery. Maybe a touch of art will restore your sanity. The gallery is different. A mix of religious paintings, landscapes, and an unsettling number of portraits where the eyes follow you. One painting shows a man marrying a goose. Another is just a loaf of bread with a face. A woman nearby bursts into tears at a painting of a teacup. She whispers, "It knew." You keep moving. Outside. You try to walk quietly down the street. No luck. You're immediately swept into a crowd, arguing over whether trains can catch fire from speed. A young man starts singing a hymn. Two ladies start waltzing in the gutter. You dodge a man offering discount bloodletting. You duck into an alley for a moment of calm, only to find it's already occupied. 4 people stand silently, listening to a man read Hamlet in reverse. You try to back away. A hand grabs yours. "Stay." Someone whispers, "The ending is better backwards." You bolt. Eventually, you find yourself at a public park, thinking you've finally escaped the madness. But even here, the air is filled with lectures, arguments, and someone trying to sell magnetic carrots. You sit on a bench beside a bearded man feeding squirrels in top hats. They understand. He says, "More than you know." At this point, you just nod, because in Victorian London, there is no personal space. Everyone talks. Everyone listens. Everyone argues. At once. Always. And you've adapted. You close your eyes. Let the hum of debate fade into white noise. Let the squirrels sort their tiny feuds. Let the lecture about pharaoh lemurs echo into memory. You've survived the press of the crowd, the fog of nonsense, the sandwich of suspicion. And for now, that's enough. You awaken to a peculiar sound. It's not the usual street vendor yodeling about eels, or the midnight cat orchestra tuning up for their 7 a.m. encore. No, this is rhythmic, metallic, and suspiciously joyful. You peer outside and spot the source, a street parade, except no one looks especially celebratory. A marching band drones its way past, tubas wheezing like dying hippos, drums thudding in that unmistakable, we didn't rehearse tempo. Behind them, a wagon creaks under the weight of large papier-mâché vegetables and 3 men pretending to be Roman senators. One keeps adjusting his toga like it's trying to escape. A banner flaps overhead annual London anti-rat celebration and potato fair. You dress quickly. How could you not investigate? Mainstream historical fact. Victorians adored public spectacles, pageants, paradas, exhibitions, and fairs were constant features of city life. Sometimes they had clear purpose, celebrating industry, monarchs, or technological marvels. And sometimes they were gloriously incoherent events, sponsored by local clubs, societies, or competing neighborhoods. As you wade into the crowd, a man tries to sell you a boiled egg on a stick. Another offers a pamphlet titled 10 Ways to Tell If You're Secretly French. You buy both. Of course you do. The floats keep coming. One boasts a giant papier-mâché sewer rat holding a sword and shield. A heroic Sir Whiskers meant to represent London's triumph over infestation. Children cheer. At Dole barks. One boy tries to climb the float and is immediately pelted with old breadcrumbs by the float's handler. Suddenly, a group of chimney sweeps dance past in synchronized motion. Their faces are so soot-covered, you're not entirely sure they have eyes. They leap, spin, and sing a tune about living in soot but dreaming of jam. You cry a little. It's moving. Fringe tidbit. Some neighborhood parades were used to mock rival areas, stage fake battles, or just outdo each other in absurdity. One 1850s great cheese pageant involved a 50-pound cheddar being paraded through town while crowds sang about its glorious rind. You pass a line of booths offering Victorian novelties, pocket-sized telescopes, instant shoe polish pills dubious, rat-shaped majipan, and commemorative spoons for events no one remembers. One booth proudly advertises, "Vote now for Best Local Corpse Discovery 1851 U, decline." Historians still argue whether these events provided genuine communal bonding or served more as distractions from the filth, disease, and institutional indifference of Victorian life. Likely both. As the parade turns down a narrower street, things get rowdier. A group of students, dressed as historical monarchs, engage in a mock joust using rolled umbrellas and dramatic shrieks. Queen Elizabeth wins by default when Henry VIII trips over a cobblestone and lands in a wheelbarrow full of cabbages. You stop by a puppet theater where two crudely carved wooden figures reenact the recent great pie dispute of Bermondsey, complete with flung flour, exaggerated accents, and a moral lesson about respecting pastry boundaries. A vendor near you mutters, "Culture," and bites into a pickled turnip. Not all events are cheerful. In the square ahead, you hear a speaker shouting about the dangers of opium, the corruption of politicians, and the rising price of soap. His passion is unmatched. His facts are theoretical. Someone throws a tomato. The speaker thanks them and eats it mid-rant. You find a quieter corner of the street, if such a thing exists, and watch the scene unfold like a fever dream wearing a top hat. There's a kind of twisted beauty in it all, the absurd sincerity, the mismatched uniforms, the way the city finds joy even in parody. And then, it happens rain, not a drizzle, not a warning. A wall of water crashes down like the sky just gave up. Paper decorations melt. Rat floats collapse. The band valiantly continues playing, their instruments emitting bubbly wails of protest. A brass player lets out one final honk and sprints for shelter. You dash under an awning beside a bakery, joining a group of soaked celebrants, all pretending this is fine. Bit of weather, eh? Says a woman in a now transparent bonnet. You nod, watching the water pour down cobblestones, sweeping confetti and pastry bits into the gutters. Someone offers you a damp biscuit. You accept, because of course you do. And then, just as suddenly it stops. The rain moves on, like a moody actor changing scenes. The sky clears. People cheer. A man shouts, "Parade's not over," and starts dragging a half-dissolved papier-mâché Queen Victoria back into position. The spirit of the city refuses to die. You wander home damp, mildly confused, and carrying a rat-shaped medal for Best Spectator Reaction. You didn't compete, but you did scream during the cheese duel. And apparently that counted. You hang the medal on the doorknob of your rented room and stare out at the street below. Children leap through puddles. A group sings a sea shanty about poorly tied shoelaces. Someone sells soggy souvenirs. And you smile. Because only in Victorian London could public spectacle feel like a cross between a historical reenactment, a favor dream, and a damp sock puppet revolution, and you wouldn't miss it for anything. You're awakened this morning, not by clanging pots, not by horses, not even by your landlord testing new ways to knock without touching the door. No. Today, it's the rattling hymn of bells. Church bells, funeral bells, shop bells, handbells, bells everywhere. It's Sunday. And in Victorian London, that means one thing: everyone's judging your soul. You throw on something moderately clean and head out to experience the most popular social activity of the age, going to church. But it's not so simple. There are hundreds of churches, chapels, temples, and tabernacles. The spiritual buffet is overwhelming. Mainstream historical fact: Victorian London was steeped in religious life. Anglican churches dominated. But Methodists, Baptists, Catholics, Unitarians, and even Swedenborgians had thriving congregations. Add in a growing number of spiritualist circles, and Sunday became less about quiet reflection and more like theological speed dating. You try your luck with the grandest church nearby, a towering Gothic structure with stained glass windows and an intimidating doorman in a velvet collar. Inside, the air smells like old wood, candle wax, and divine disapproval. The service is long. The minister speaks in a slow, measured tone that seems specifically engineered to lull entire pews to sleep. You admire the ceiling. You count the bricks. You briefly forget how time works. A child beside you starts sobbing. His mother gives him a peppermint and a Bible. In that order, he accepts both with a martyr's sigh. But not all churches are this solemn. You sneak out during hymn number 4, O Lord. Please, spare us from damp socks, and stumble into a street chapel down the road. Inside, a preacher in his 20s leaps from the pulpit with the energy of a caffeinated squirrel. He hollers about temptation, shoelaces, and the evils of cheap jam. The congregation claps, sings, weeps, and occasionally throws hats. You nearly catch one. Fringe tidbit: some evangelical preachers of the era became celebrities, drawing massive crowds with fiery sermons, emotional conversions, and sometimes elaborate stage props. One minister used a live donkey to illustrate stubbornness of spirit. The donkey later escaped and became an urban legend. You head back outside into the maze of beliefs. On one corner, a woman preaches universal brotherhood. Across from her, a man yells about eternal fire. They occasionally wave at each other. A group of spiritualists hands you a leaflet about communicating with your inner ghost. You ask if yours is on vacation. They don't laugh. Historians still argue whether Victorian religiosity reflected sincere faith or social pressure wrapped in ritual. Church attendance was high, but so was the rate of whispered doubts, bacchalations, and theological satire. You pause by a cemetery to catch your breath, morbid, but peaceful. Victorians took death very seriously, sometimes extravagantly so. The graves here range from modest headstones to full-blown marble towers, complete with angels, cherubs, and weeping urns. You overhear a tour guide explaining mourning etiquette: black for a year, veils for widows, no laughing on Tuesdays, okay? Maybe not that last part. Entire industries thrived off grief, mourning clothes. Morning, Yavelry. Morning. Stationary. One woman allegedly wore black for 62 years. You respect the commitment. A nearby grave has a plaque that reads, "Taken by a rogue oyster." You assume it's a metaphor. You assume wrong. You keep walking and end up unexpectedly at a spiritualist salon. Curiosity wins. Inside. Dim lighting. Heavy curtains. And a table with 6 people holding hands. You're invited to join. You sit. A medium in lace gloves closes her eyes and channels Clarence. A ghost who apparently likes bad puns and used to be a dentist. Clarence says, "Your aura smells of regret and cinnamon." He also insists you avoid jam this week. You nod solemnly and thank him. You leave with a headache and a free pamphlet titled Ectoplasm and You. It's late afternoon now. Bells have keyed. The air feels lighter. You see families walking home. Men tipping hats. Children kicking pebbles at each other's shins in what you assume is a local sport. You pass a church notice board listing upcoming sermons. Why we fear umbrellas and should. 7 ways to avoid eternal dampness. Divine laundry, a metaphor gone too far. You consider attending all 3. The final stop of your day is a candlelit evening service in a tiny riverside chapel. No loud sermons. No dramatic conversions, just a quiet room. A few hymns. And a gentle reminder that, despite the soot and chaos, some parts of this city remember how to breathe. You sit in silence, eyes half closed, as the organ plays something slow and hopeful. The flicker of candles reflects in the windows. A child snores softly in a pew. The minister offers a blessing that's part prayer, part weather report. You leave with your coat smelling faintly of wax and incense. Back in your room. You hang your damp hat on the hook, peel off your shoes, and collapse onto the squeaky bed. For once, there's no shouting outside. No bells. No foghorns. Just the distant clink of a milk cart and the hush of London settling into sleep. Your spiritual journey was confusing, chaotic, and occasionally haunted by Clarence. But strangely, you feel better. By now, you've braved the fog, dodged the rats, befriended a man who speaks to squirrels, and been gently roasted by a Victorian ghost named Clarence. You've earned a reward. Maybe a night out. A little theater. Perhaps, so you slip on your best soot-free coat, okay? Your least dirty one. And make your way through the flickering gaslit streets to a grand building with columns, velvet drap, and posters plastered everywhere. Tonight's show, Murder in a Pie Shop. A tragicomedy. With music. Mainstream historical fact, Victorian theatre was explosively popular, from Shakespeare revivals to melodramas, burlesques, and comic operas. London's stages entertained all classes, aristocrats, merchants, chimney sweeps, and curious time travelers alike. You enter through the pit doors, where the cheaper tickets mean standing elbow to elbow with sweaty strangers and possibly a chicken or two. The smell is festive. Someone's eating pickled eggs. Someone else is loudly explaining the plot before it begins. A small child is using your coat as a napkin. The curtain rises. The plot, wild. A humble baker, accused of stuffing local dignitaries into meat pies, must clear his name while juggling a forbidden romance. 4 songs about moral ambiguity, and a sidekick goose named Beatrice. You are enthralled. The villain has a mustache so sharp it could file your taxes. The heroine faints 4 times before intermission. The audience boos, cheers, and throws the occasional potato. It's immersive theater before the term existed. Fringe tidbit. Some theaters encouraged rowdiness, especially in the cheaper seats. People brought snacks, shouted advice to the actors, and occasionally stormed the stage. One infamous actor in 1856 was egg-baptized so frequently he began charging extra for front-row splash seats. Historians still argue whether this raucous interaction diluted the artistic integrity of the performances or elevated them into a uniquely communal art form. Either way, it's louder than Netflix. By intermission, your cheeks hurt from smiling. A man offers you a warm cider from a mystery jug. You accept. It tastes like spiced regret. Someone nearby is selling roasted chestnuts and questionable cigars. You buy both and instantly regret one. In the second act, the goose performs a surprisingly moving solo before biting the judge. The crowd weeps. The pie shop is saved. Love triumphs. Justice is served, just not in a pie. You leave the theater glowing. London has a strange magic at night, like it's exhaling. The gaslights blur into golden halos. The soot softens. The voices drift into lullaby territory. And you're not done yet. There's one more stop. You've heard whispers at the market, in the pub, in a leaflet you found under your bread of a midnight club. A secret gathering. No signs. No rules. Just a dimly lit cellar beneath a bookshop, where thinkers, weirdos, and wanderers meet to talk, debate, and read terrible poetry aloud. You find the place by instinct and a very sleepy cat on the stoop who meows exactly once as if to say, "Yes, here." The bookseller eyes you, nods once, and opens a narrow wooden door behind the shelves. Downstairs, candled glow. Mismatched chairs circle a tiny stage. A man with half an eyebrow recites something about soup being a metaphor for death. Everyone snaps politely. Someone else reads an ode to their hat. Another plays a lullaby on a saw. You share a biscuit with a woman who claims she once arm-wrestled a prime minister, and no one questions it. You're invited to speak. You panic. You stand. And you simply say, "I came from the fog, and now I'm here." They clap, like you quoted Shakespeare. You sit back down, heart pounding, cheeks warm. No judgment, just tea, and oddness, and belonging. Eventually, the candles burn low. The last poem is whispered. The cellar empties. You climb back out into the night. London breathes. You breathe with it. You cross a bridge homeward. The Thames shimmering darkly below. A boat glides by with a single lantern. Its reflection, slicing through the water like a dream, you almost remember. The wind nudges your collar. But it's gentle now, like the city saying, "Not bad. Time traveler. Not bad at all." You reach your room. Kick off your shoes. Drop the chestnut shells into the bin. You hang up your coat, which now smells like theater smoke, pie, and a little bit of goose. Then you lie down, not on your squeaky bed, but on a floor pillow by the window, watching the city blink and dim, listening for the last cart to pass, waiting for that perfect silence before dawn. And there it is. You smile. Tomorrow, you'll face laundry disasters, questionable breakfasts, and someone trying to sell you powdered teeth. But tonight, you rest. You've done Victorian London better than most of its own citizens. Morning breaks like overcooked pudding, slow, gray, and somehow both wet and lumpy. The light outside is the kind of dim that makes you question whether it's actually morning or just the sun giving up for the day. You pull on your socks still damp, naturally, and venture out with a new goal: personal hygiene. Or, at least, the Victorian approximation of it. You begin your quest at the public washhouse, one of the greatest luxuries for the city's working poor. It's open twice a week, operated by a woman named Maud, who speaks only in passive-aggressive grunts and can shuck soap with alarming speed. Mainstream historical fact: public baths were introduced in Victorian London to encourage cleanliness among lower-income residents, many of whom lived in homes without running water. The movement was part sanitation, part moral campaign, with the firm belief that clean bodies produced clean minds and less criminal behavior. Inside the washhouse, the air is thick with steam, soap, and mild panic. You're handed a bar of what claims to be lavender soap. Though it smells like boiled celery, your cubicle is tiny, damp, and contains a tin tub, a wooden bench, and a hook that immediately falls off the wall. Still, you bathe. Sort of. You manage to spill half the water. You stub your toe. You scald one elbow and freeze the other. A child screams in the next room, possibly out of joy, possibly existential dread. You can't tell. Fringe tidbit: the term soap dodger originated as a slur for those who couldn't afford regular washing. But, ironically, the soap itself was often so harsh, full of lye and grit, that frequent use could burn the skin. So really, dodging it may have been wise. After your bath, you're feeling oddly proud, refreshed, victorious. Even until you realize your clean shirt was left near the fireplace and now smells like pork fat. Progress. You head outside in search of a barber, or more accurately, a tonsorial adventure. You find a shop that advertises haircuts, bloodletting, gentle gossip. A perfect fit. The barber wears a striped vest and an expression of controlled chaos. He greets you with the phrase, "Fancy, a trim, or a transformation?" You say, "Just a tidy up." You receive what can only be described as a Victorian faux hawk. As he snips, he tells you about his cousin's cow that once predicted the weather with uncanny accuracy. You nod politely while wondering if your sideburns will ever look symmetrical again. Historians still argue whether Victorian barbers were more hygienic than dangerous, as many reused razors, towels, and sometimes leeches, without sterilization. The line between self-care and battlefield triage was thin. Post-haircut, you wander into a chemist's shop, hoping for toothpaste. The apothecary behind the counter offers you a small tin labeled tooth powder guaranteed to whiten or worsen. You sniff it. It smells like chalk and mild regret. You purchase it anyway. You also acquire a bottle of tonic, promising robust digestion and romantic flair, a sachet of dried herbs meant to repel melancholy, something called foot tincture. With a skull on the label, you leave, feeling slightly more cursed than cleansed. Needing to escape the fumes of Victorian grooming, you take refuge in a city park, London's lungs. They called it Trees Birds. A pond that only slightly resembles soup. You sit on a bench and notice a group of ladies strolling by. Parasols, twirling like soft propellers. They're laughing behind gloved hands. One of them drops a handkerchief accidentally. You try to return it and are met with a scandalized gasp. Apparently, in Victorian etiquette, you just proposed marriage. You apologize. She swoons. Her friend accuses you of ruining her season. You sprint away. In another corner of the park, a group of boys plays cricket while a goat looks on suspiciously. An elderly man reads the Times upside down, mouthing each word as if casting a spell. A dog chases a pigeon that seems eerily unfazed. You lie back in the grass, staring at the sky. For the first time in ages, it's not gray. It's almost blue, or at least a polite bluish fog. And for a moment, you forget the grime, the noise, the pickled everything. You just exist, clean-ish, freshly tonsured, breathing air that smells faintly of rosewater and horses. Of course, the moment passes. A nearby street sweeper accidentally flings mud directly onto your trousers. A passing poet recites a limerick that includes 3 slurs and a metaphor about marmalade. And someone starts playing a hurdy-gurdy with true malicious intent. But you don't mind, because this is Victorian London. Filthy, bizarre, and utterly alive. And today, you took a bath. You begin the day optimistic, clean-ish, coiffed-ish, and already only mildly cursed by last night's digestive tonic. You decide it's time to tackle one of the grandest, most theatrical parts of Victorian life romance, or, more specifically, attempting it without getting married by accident or sued for looking too long at someone's ankle. You stroll through the marketplace, where the air smells like fish, violets, and 2 kinds of dishonesty. You're on the lookout for eye contact Victorian for, I'm basically married now. Mainstream historical fact. Courtship in the 1850s was an elaborate, highly regulated affair involving chaperones, calling cards, parlor visits, and a series of increasingly formal letters that often sounded like legal contracts written by poets with low blood sugar. You don't even make it 3 stalls before you brush past a woman carrying a bouquet of chrysanthemums. She blushes. You panic. Did you just propose, or insult her, or ask for directions to the apothecary? The correct answer is yes. You escape to Hyde Park, where couples promenade under watchful trees and even more watchful aunties. A gentleman tips his hat to a lady, and she nods precisely once. You think it's a subtle invitation to call, or possibly a warning. It's like Morse code with bonnets. French tidbit Victorians used an entire system called the language of flowers to send romantic messages. A yellow carnation meant rejection. A red rose, Mont Passion. A basil sprig meant, I hate you with stylish flair. Florists were basically cryptographers with potting soil. You attempt small talk with a bookish girl feeding pigeons. She asks if you've read Byron. You say the sandwich guy. She throws a scone at your feet and storms off. You try again this time. At a tea house, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper corset offers you a seat. Her name is Eleanor. She speaks 7 languages, has opinions on chimney design, and may be flirting. Your Altmischer, maybe 55%. She touches your sleeve and says, you walk like someone who's been bitten by history. You want to reply something charming. Instead, you say, ow, still. You walk her home. She gives you a calling card with embossed lettering and a hand-drawn cat. You are smitten. Historians still argue whether romantic interactions of the time reflected authentic connection or were entirely constrained by social scripts and economic motives. Probably both. Eleanor seems real enough. Though, back in your room, you stare at her card. What now? Well, now, you call, which, in 1850s, London means writing a short, elegant note and delivering it via footman, messenger, or hopeful child. You hire a boy named Tim, who charges extra if he doesn't eat the envelope. Later that afternoon, a reply arrives. You are invited to take tea with her parents in the drawing room, under direct supervision. With minimal touching of biscuits, you dress with military precision. Comb your hair, polish your boots, hide your accent. Practice not sounding like you come from a century that believes in Wi-Fi and oat milk. You arrive and are ushered into a room full of cushions, antimacassars, and judgment. Her father asks about your prospects. Her mother asks about your lineage. Eleanor, sitting beside the piano, gives you a tiny wink and plays the opening notes of something dramatic. You answer their questions, honestly, no fortune, no title, but a healthy curiosity about sewage reform and a sincere fondness for their daughter's drawing of a marmot on the card. They are unimpressed. Eleanor is delighted. The tea is hot. The cake is dry. The air is electric. As you leave, her mother pulls you aside and says, you may write again, but no haikus. You promise nothing. You walk home beaming. Because, in a city this dense with soot and sadness, this full of rules and gloom, even a single glance, a crooked smile, a 2-minute conversation about marmots can feel revolutionary. You sleep that night, wrapped in the scent of overboiled tea and possible courtship. And for once, not even Clarence, the ghost interrupts. You wake up slowly this morning, lulled by the rarest of sounds in Victorian London, relative silence. No shouting vendors. No clanging dust carts. Just a distant bell tolling noon, like it's still thinking about breakfast. You blink at the ceiling, then realize something miraculous. You've survived. Multiple meals of boiled mysteries. An almost romance with a woman who speaks fluent sarcasm. A ghost with dental opinions. And one haircut that might still be illegal in Prussia. And somehow, you're still here. Still standing. Still relatively plague-free. Which means it's time to pack up and leave Victorian London at least. For now. You start with your modest possessions, 2 shirts both suspiciously starchy, a notebook full of odd things Londoners say, 1 goose feather from the theater, and a pressed flower Eleanor once handed you without explanation. Basil, you're trying not to take it personally. Mainstream historical fact. For many visitors and immigrants to London in the 19th century, departures were permanent or perilous, whether leaving for colonies, for health, or for scandalous reasons. The act of leaving often came with a tangle of paperwork, social whispers, and heartfelt goodbyes. You take one last stroll through your street, the cobbles that tried to murder your ankles, the chimney stack that always looked like it was judging you, and the neighbor who might be an alchemist or just really into jam. You wave goodbye to Tim, the envelope-devouring errand boy. He nods once, salutes with a sausage, and vanishes into the fog. You pass Maud's washhouse. She grunts. You feel seen, and then, inevitably, you find yourself in front of Eleanor's house. You weren't going to stop by. You didn't write ahead. You don't even have a flower because the last one might have meant, I hate your posture. But she's on the stoop. Book in lap. As if the story always ends this way. You leaving, she says. Not looking up. You nod. Good. You're allergic to the 19th century. You smile. She closes the book. Stands. Walks over. Hands you something small and square. A hand-drawn map. With exactly one path marked in red ink from her door to the corner bakery and back again. In case you forget the way. She says. You don't ask what it means. You just fold it gently and slide it into your coat pocket. Fringe tidbit. In some parts of London, it became a tradition to send departing friends away with hand-drawn keepsakes, tiny maps, pressed leaves, or even a joke recipe. It was a quiet way of saying, don't disappear. You head toward the Thames, past the fish stalls and the street where you once accidentally joined a protest about boot taxes. The air is thick with that London perfume soot, smoke, and sausages. Historians still argue whether the Victorian era was a time of great progress or great oppression. Was it the height of civility or the nadir of hypocrisy? Likely both. What's certain is it was never boring. As you step onto the creaking wooden dock, you hear a voice shout from behind. Don't forget, Clarence. You turn. It's Eleanor again. Laughing. He says he left something in your sock. You check. There's a note. You owe me a scone. See. Of course, the boat rocks gently beneath your boots. A man in a tall hat helps you aboard, nodding once in that very Victorian way that says, I acknowledge your existence, but reserve judgment. The city fades behind you, bricks turning to shadow, streets folding inward, like the pages of a well-read novel. And you stare into the mist. Fog has always been a metaphor in this city. It obscures. Yes. Confuses. Hides. But it also softens things. Wraps them. Makes even the ugly parts look like they belong. You watch as chimneys become silhouettes. As the cries of the market become muffled. As the steeples vanish like distant punctuation marks. The boat turns. The city is gone. And now, it's just you, floating forward. carrying the smell of coal and basil, the weight of a borrowed coat, and the gentle whisper of a girl who once said you walked like history had bitten you. You did it. You survived 1850s London. No leeches barely. No chimney incidents, surprisingly. And with your dignity mostly intact minus the soap explosion and the foot tincture incident, we agreed never to discuss again. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into the wind down together. So here you are safe, sound, and far from the grimy clutches of Victorian London. The fog has lifted. The ghost has gone quiet. The streets no longer stretch out like a maze of soot and scrambled morality. You can breathe again, slowly, deeply, in and out. The air now carries no hint of coal smoke or mystery meat. Just stillness. Just comfort. Maybe a whiff of lavender from a pillow sachet. Or the faintest rustle of leaves outside your window. You feel the warmth of your own bed beneath you soft. Clean sheets. Not straw-stuffed mattresses or woolen death traps. No rats. No soot on the pillow. Just you. Weightless now. Drifting between 2 centuries. Your mind, still spinning slightly with gaslights and corsets and the absurdity of horse-drawn sewage tankers, begins to slow. The faces blur. The jokes fade. The memories soften into nothing more than distant lanterns, bobbing along the Thames of your thoughts, and your body, heavy now, perfectly still. No need to wander tonight. No fog to follow. No calling cards or phantom bakers. You are here. You are calm. You are done. Let your thoughts settle like ash after the final chimney sweep's climb. Let your breath fall into rhythm with the quiet hum around you. You've walked the streets of the past. You've listened to their nonsense, their whispers, their soapbox sermons. And now, you've stepped back through the curtain safe in your own time, your own room, your own gentle peace. Eyes closed. Now, thoughts soft, and in this stillness, one last whisper echoes from that distant fog. Well done, traveler. Sleep.